For most of us, happiness feels like this thing we get after a promotion, after we fix a problem, after life finally goes our way. But what if that whole way of thinking is backward? What if we've been chasing happiness in all the wrong places? Seriously, what if it's not some destination you have to struggle to reach, but more like a state you can learn to create right here, right now, no matter what's going on in your life? We're going to explore this by digging into something really unique, an imaginary conversation between some of the world's top experts on the mind and body. This is the big idea from author Marci Shimoff. She suggests we all have this sort of internal happiness thermostat, a preset level of joy. Sure, life events make the temperature go up or down for a bit, but we almost always drift back to that same baseline. But here's the good news. That thermostat isn't fixed. You can actually reset it. So to really unpack this, our source material brings together the ideas of brilliant psychologists, neuroscientists, and philosophers into one powerful conversation. We're going to break down their collective wisdom to figure out how we can all start cultivating a little more of that inner joy. So let's start with the big shift in thinking right here. Is happiness just some fleeting reaction to good things happening to us? Or could it be more like a muscle, something we can intentionally train and make stronger over time? Okay, let's get a clear definition of this. The happiness thermostat is your default emotional setting. Think about it, right? You have good days, you have bad days, but you probably have a familiar baseline you always seem to return to. Well, the experts in this conversation argue that unless you actively work to change that setting, it's going to stay right where it is. Okay, so if we can change it, why is it so darn hard? Why do even really smart, self-aware people get stuck in a rut? Well, the experts are pretty clear on this. It's not because we don't know enough. As Tony Robbins puts it, emotion beats logic every time. Just understanding something doesn't rewire your brain. Only consistent practice does. Without that, we just slide right back into our old patterns. All right, so if practice is the answer, where do we even begin? The first pillar is your mind, and more specifically, the stories you tell yourself. The experts argue that our suffering often has very little to do with what's actually happening out there, and everything to do with our interpretation of it. This was the big question they tackled in this part of the discussion. Of all the narratives we have running on a loop in our heads, which ones are the most toxic to our well-being? Just think about it for yourself for a second. What's your go-to painful story? So the experts zeroed in on these three. The "I am broken" story is maybe the most damaging because it takes a temporary feeling and makes it your permanent identity. It's the difference between "I feel sad right now" and "I am a sad person." Then there's the "I was hurt" story, which keeps us stuck replaying that awful event or conversation over and over again. And finally, "I deserve better," which, as Eckhart Tolle would say, puts us in a constant and totally exhausting war with reality itself. So why on earth do we cling to these stories if they hurt so much? Well, as researcher Bernie Brown might explain, they can feel like a suit of armor. They protect us from more disappointment, they feel familiar, but that armor, it eventually becomes a prison. It becomes a destiny. Yeah, it keeps more pain out, but it also keeps joy out. So the key is to see it as armor you can choose to take off, not a destiny you're stuck with forever. And this just leads us to this powerful, powerful quote from Maya Angelou that says it all. You may carry your pain with dignity, but you need not carry it as destiny. The past happened, yes, but the story we tell ourselves about it, that isn't set in stone. But here's the thing. Changing our stories is only half the battle. We've talked about the mind, but we now have to talk about the second pillar, the one that's so often ignored, your body. Because you can have the most positive mindset in the world, but if your body doesn't feel safe, happiness is going to stay out of reach. This is a really stark but crucial idea. Trauma expert Bessel van der Kolk always says that our bodies keep the score. If your nervous system is basically wired for survival, it can physically block you from experiencing joy, no matter how much you think you want it. So how does this actually work in our bodies? Well, first off, a nervous system that's stuck in fight or flight can literally see the vulnerability that comes with joy as a threat. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman talks about how chronic stress floods us with cortisol, which physically shuts down the reward circuits in our brain. It's not a character flaw, it's a chemical reality. This brings us to a really important distinction we have to make. You've heard of toxic positivity? That's forced positivity. It's a form of denial. It's your mind trying to override what your body is feeling. But embodied happiness, that's about integration. It's about creating a sense of safety in the body where all feelings are allowed to be there. And paradoxically, that's what makes room for joy to actually show up. As Dr. Sanjay Gupta puts it, when the body remembers safety, joy doesn't need to be forced, it arrives. See, the way in isn't through more positive thinking. It's through teaching the body how to feel safe again. We've covered the mind, we've covered the body. So, what's the whole point of all this work? What's the goal? It's a pretty profound state, actually. A happiness that doesn't need a reason to exist. It's not dependent on things going your way. It just is. You know, the philosopher Alan Watts put it so beautifully. He said the great joke is that happiness has been waiting for us to stop hunting it. We spend our whole lives chasing it, right? Trying to achieve it. But what if the chase itself is what's keeping it away? What if happiness is what's left over when all that striving finally stops? Now, I know a common fear is, well, if I'm happy for no reason, won't I just become lazy and complacent? But the experts argue that the exact opposite is true. When you're no longer desperately trying to achieve things just to make you happy, your ambition gets purified. It shifts from this frantic need to prove you're worthy into a joyful expression of who you really are. So how do you even start? Marci Shimoff leaves us with this really simple, really powerful invitation. Don't try to change your whole life overnight. Just start here. Pick one tiny new habit. Gently question one old story you've been telling yourself, and offer yourself just one single moment of kindness. That's it. That's the beginning of the path. And that brings us to the final, most powerful takeaway from this whole thing. Happiness isn't some treasure you find after a long, hard search. It's already here. It's waiting right underneath the stories, the tension, and all the striving. Your job isn't to go out and find it, it's simply to allow it in.